According to immigration officials, our southern border is at a breaking point after more than 76,000 illegal immigrants tried crossing in February. Okay, fine, but can we talk about something that really matters? Have you seen how stupid Sonic the Hedgehog looks in this upcoming movie? That's what's important. Also, malls across the country plan to marry more... Malls across the country plan to carry more CBD-infused products, so Baskin-Robbins just went from 31 flavors to 420. And finally, President Trump welcomed the 2018 Division I football champs, the North Dakota State Bison, to the White House yesterday. To keep things simple this time, every player just got a bag of Funyuns and a Tic Tac. The Trump Report starts now.
You're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Yes, indeed, it is the Trump Report. Welcome. I'm Christian Bladt, joined as well often by Scott Moore. None of the ladies are with us today.
Not today.
I don't know what happened. What did we say? What did we do?
What do we do
offend
now?
them? Yeah, exactly. Well. So, obviously, we'll give you the white male perspective right now.
Yep.
And, if there's anything we're missing, please join us in the chat if you're watching live on YouTube, or feel free to leave comments after the fact. Lots of ground to cover, as always. One of the things that I wanted to start with is this notion, and this ties in directly to the border wall for our friend Storage Yard resident who's there in the chat, is we're starting to see President Trump's sort of, the failing New York Times has a headline that says Trump's grip shows sign of slipping as Senate prepares to block wall emergency. It wasn't so much of a grip on the Senate. It was sort of like a stranglehold, and everybody was afraid, and I think... now we're getting closer to people are going to be running for some re-elections, and then they really have to figure, how close do we get to them? How far do you back off? It's a little bit of a waiting game because this directly ties into the fact that Rand Paul is the fourth GOP senator who will basically rebel against this voting down the state of emergency at the border. So I don't know. Is he running for president again? Book deal, but hair club for men.
Something.
Yeah. So
something's up.
That's an indication. You have your regulars. Your expected familiar faces who are voting this down. You got, of course, Murkowski and Susan Collins, and I already forgot the other guy.
Tom Tillis.
Yes. Tom Tillis. So, and then Rand Paul's like, well, that sounds like a fun dinner party. Let me join in. So, Scott, what do you think about all of this? What do you think could be a possible motivation for Rand Paul? And, granted, it's just one more person sort of going against Trump. But what do you think this all says?
Well, we kind of touched on it last week. I think that overall, like you said just a moment ago, too, you have several of these people that are going to be up for really difficult re-elections potentially next year. And they're trying to find that balancing line between, how far to separate themselves from him. And I also think in the bigger picture, they do realize that this is a separation between Congress and the executive branch, the legislative branch, and exactly how much that they can try to disagree with this in the sense that they know that now a future Democratic president or other future presidents will try to use this national emergency type situation when Congress doesn't give them money for things that they want. And so for a lot of these Republicans, they're realizing, especially someone like Rand Paul, that's going to be like, you know what, this is not something that I agree with. Either Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. It's the fact that there is a separation with the legislative and executive. And the legislative said, no, we're not giving you this money, and for you to do this roundabout sets a bad precedent for future presidents. And so I think a lot of them are looking at that and just saying this is not good overall for the future of the country.
Right, and as we discussed last week, all President Trump's going to have to do is veto it, and then it would go into effect because there would have to be 60 senators voting down to override the veto. And I think that you might be able to, get 6 more Republicans to vote on something, but I don't think it's this, especially because all of them will get, bad nicknames on Twitter from President Trump, and they don't really want. Although I don't know if Murkowski really has one. I don't know if he has a good nickname for her.
No, I think he tries to be careful about giving certain nicknames to some of the Republican women in Congress too, just because he hasn't done that with Susan Collins either. But I think that, again, it's going to be more of the symbolic nature of it. It's like, okay, Congress is saying we're voting against this. We disagree with what you're doing. Allow him to now do his first veto of the presidency. And it does at least set, like, okay, like you said, the likelihood of being able to actually override it is slim. Nothing's impossible, but it's more of the symbolic thing to say, hey, we disagree with you. And they know that it's already, going to be in lawsuits here in court down the line anyway. So for most of Congress, it's like, okay, at least we've registered our displeasure. We've done at least part of it to say we don't agree with you, and then let the courts decide in the long run what happens with it. So
and look, regardless of the party, there's really no shame in a presidential veto. The fact that he's gotten this far in without one is just, it's okay. That's interesting. That'll be a nice footnote at some point.
Yeah, but not surprising though, considering he had a Republican Congress for the first 2 years. That the likelihood of having a veto is a lot lower. So now, it would be more surprising if he wasn't vetoing from this point on. So
and obviously, when it comes to your point about making nicknames and comments about female members, Republican members of Congress, at least, there's probably somebody that he bounces them off of. Maybe it's Sarah Sanders, maybe it's somebody, and they probably universally turn down the idea of, like, what if I call her Lisa Fatkowski? And it's like, no, that's not.
Yeah, you don't want to go there.
Shout out to Jeff who gave me that joke. I just want to make sure he gets credit for it. But in any case, I think it'll be interesting to see. And ultimately, this, I don't know. I guess, like, the diehard people who want the wall, like our friend Storage Yard Resident, who's in the chat every show, which we always appreciate.
We do.
We know how important that is to him, the wall. I don't know that people think, if it's going to be built, all of a sudden, in time for, re-election day is what they're probably calling that day. But I think he needs it to not be finished. He needs the pushback. He needs to be like, you gotta re-elect me. Because, if that thing gets built in the next year, and then it's like, oh, what do we need that guy for? Let's get somebody else. And so, he needs this. And look, Democrats are not, this should be a fairly easy job running against this president. And then they're able to make, fairly sizable issues out of things like the Green New Deal. You have people have latched on the right about the idea of, like, oh, so they don't want us to fly around in the air anymore and just ride bikes everywhere, and you're able to, I was literally going to use the word Trump up and not mean it as a pun. But that's what...
Can't help it, yeah.
Who knew when that word Trump was designed to mean that? They just somehow, whoever coined that term knew that it was going to be... Yeah,
very prescient.
But, so there's those issues. And look, there's this Born Alive bill that the Senate didn't pass, and they're able to make really compelling issues for, yes, the base, but also you have moderates who, if you tell them about some of these things, you're like, well, that's just crazy. And even if you don't like President Trump, it's easy to be convinced, like, I don't need to be told I'm not allowed to have a car anymore or fly in an airplane. I obviously am. I abhor the idea that a baby could be born and aborted after the fact. Is the way that is the way that story is being spun, and that all comes from that bill that came out of Virginia, which I don't know what's going on in Virginia.
I know, right?
I mean, Texas is always talking about seceding, but can we just maybe kick a state out? I mean, we don't want another civil war.
Maybe just kick them out for temporarily.
You know what? I don't want to kick anybody out.
Just as time out.
I love the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Just a time out.
Let's go ahead and let's put them in time out.
Yeah, and then they can come back.
Let's what?
Get through it. Work through their issues. We're
not going to take your dues this year. Your membership is on hold. We'll have 49 states for the next year, and then let's just revisit.
Yeah,
you know?
go through some counseling and work on themselves a little bit, and then you're ready to come back and better than ever.
I mean, the two issues that I referenced, the Green New Deal and this Born Alive bill, very complicated, and there's a lot to both of them. But what do you think to the point that, you know, Republicans have both of those things just fell in their lap, and they're like, oh, we can really like hammer our way at these things. So what do you think about both of those?
Well, I think, and this is again something we've talked about many times over, is that the messaging on the Democratic side is not nearly as good as on the Republican side. And that's the thing too, is that a lot of Republicans are very active voters and will go out and vote in the primaries, in general elections, and you know, all the times that a lot of Democrats may not go out and vote. And then on top of that, they're very solid about keeping this message and doubling down on this message, and everyone kind of gets in line. And that's the thing too, where a lot of people will say, "Oh, I don't like Trump, but at least I know I'm going to get my Supreme Court justices. At least I know, you know, they're going to go with the anti-abortion." You know, there's certain things that they wholeheartedly agree with. Maybe they don't like him as a person, but they know at least that those things will get done, and so they will still go out and vote knowing that they're going to have this. Whereas the Democrats, you know, they've always talked about in the past too, end up wanting to fall in love with the candidate, and they take their time, and then there's a lot more infighting with Democrats because then they're like, well, we want a purity test, and this is who we want to have, and they have to be this far left, and that's why a lot of times too you get some of these things that the base on the Democratic side is very passionate about, like the new Green Deal, and some of the other things too that are on the far left side that they end up taking and running with, where the moderates and the center rights are easily able to be like, oh, this is laughable, this is silly, and you can get some of those people to end up falling in line and voting for Republicans, even if they might have wanted to go for Democrat because the left side is a little too extreme. So, I mean, that's the general overall, is that Democrats are just not as good at the messaging, and they allow the messaging to happen before they take control of it. And Republicans will come right in, and they will double down, and they will get everybody in line.
Yeah, and they'll be able to streamline their message. But at this point, I think Scott and I are the only people who haven't announced that we're running for president. Actually,
but stay tuned.
Yeah,
who knows?
That's true. You never know. Let me commend Senator Jeff Merkley, because he announced that he's not running for president. Michael Bloomberg also announced that he's not running for president. So I commend both of them. And you're thinking, like, I forgot somebody.
Yeah. Right.
Hillary Clinton said she's not running for president. But until it's election day and people are voting, that is when I'll believe, like, oh, she really didn't run.
Well, I actually said that, too, to somebody the other day. I was like, well, until it actually happens, I wouldn't be surprised she would swoop in at the last minute.
But especially now, you know, and it just, if, you know, it's very easy to say, like, look, I just didn't think anybody had a chance, and I understand the electoral math, but I did get 3 million votes more than this guy, and you know, I do only need to get one more vote than him. So maybe if we just spread out where the voting is, so you know, and I mean, look, I don't think Hillary should run for president.
No, I agree.
I think that she had her time, and unfortunately,
did.
her time wasn't even 2016. Her time was 2008.
Right, it was 2008.
That's really when it was her time.
Exactly.
And I think that you know, Joe Biden's just been around long enough, and you know, Bernie, I think he's a good campaigner, but. I think it would be interesting to see a debate between him and Trump, but I don't know. It's just so much yelling. You know, I would have such a headache after
Two
that.
septuagenarians getting into an argument.
Yeah.
And be like, you know.
So I mean, look.
Two grandfathers.
And
like,
there's always the chance too that the nominee is someone who has not announced yet, and I'm not talking about like a Joe Biden
or
you know?
Beto O'Rourke or any of those people. Yeah.
I'm not talking about any of the people that are expected to do it. You know, it just could be somebody else's. Like, I think maybe, you know, like, obviously people didn't think that 2008 was going to be when Obama ran for president. When we saw him speak in 2004, you're like, okay, so after Hillary, you know, into 2016 it was going to be Obama's turn. And
even then I thought, well, you know, maybe he'll be somewhere in the administration. Like, I see a lot of these people that are running now, I'm thinking, oh, they'd be great in the administration somewhere, a future Democratic president, but they're not necessarily presidential timber per se. But yeah, I think it's that's the problem too, is that we're going to run into for the next year or so, is the fact that we're going to have the Democratic side is going to have very diluted messages, because you're going to have so many people running, whereas Republicans can probably stick more to the script as much as you can with Trump as your, you know, standard bearer, but you have that one person there as opposed to 20 plus people on the Democratic side. So even if your message from Trump that's all over the place, at least is actually more coherent and at least more streamlined than you're going to get from Democrats. They're trying to appeal to all these different groups of people, and so it's going to be difficult for Democrats, I think, over the next year until we start getting into primaries and debates and really starting to winnow down the field a little bit.
There's a very lively conversation going on in the chat, and one of the things that our friend Storage Yard Resident said is that the Democrats will nominate a woman who is not deserving to be president. And to he and everyone else in the chat, I ask, who are some women who are deserving to be president? Obviously, Storage Yard Resident is conservative leaning, so he's going to feel, like any Democrat woman doesn't deserve to be president. So I'm just sort of wondering. And yes, Storage Yard Resident does point out there was a comedy show that toured that was Trump versus Bernie Sanders, two comedians. One of them is the guy who does
that's right.
Trump, the Trump or the President show on Comedy Central. So, Jeff in the booth asks Oprah. Is Oprah deserving to be president? I wish Chelsea was here right now.
I know, well,
because Chelsea's all ready for the Oprah Gayle King ticket. She's just like, can I vote for it now? Is where Chelsea's at.
Of course, I watched. Was it Super Soul Sunday or whatever? I never do. I just happened to have it on, and Beto O'Rourke was on, and Oprah was interviewing him, and she was trying to pry an answer out of him.
Sure.
But the funny thing was, he kind of turned around and asked her. But what I took from it is the whole time she kept saying, "Oh, you have to feel it. You have to really know. You have to be ready." Like telling him that, and it made me think, okay, well, clearly she's not feeling it either, because I think at this point she would have thought this was an opportunity to go in, and not necessarily in that episode, but just in general. I think she's got her empire, she's got her stuff going on. She doesn't...
It's the kind of decision that Donald Trump should have made. It's like, the life I have now is so much better than being president.
Yeah, I mean, then that's the thing, and I think she looks at it realizing that then she becomes a partisan, and it takes away from her universal appeal, because that she's got a ton of conservative women that are huge fans of hers, and you start to translate into running for office. And I mean, look, even Hillary Clinton had that for a while because she was Secretary of State. So a lot of people looked at her. It was more of a nonpartisan job in that sense, and so a lot more people liked her, thought highly of her. She had very high approval ratings. But the minute you step into a race, that kind of diminishes everything. And I think Oprah's probably taking a step back, like, I've got a great life. Why do I need to mess it up by going to try to run for president and kind of maybe potentially lose what I've kind of established for myself and my fan base and everything else? So I took it as that she's not interested, because there were a couple of moments there where she's doing some of these speeches. I thought maybe she really is going to jump in, and that would be quite a interesting thing.
It would be surprising, but in the way that I guess it's also not surprising. But it'd be like, oh, I really didn't think she was in. Somebody whose life is about to get a lot more interesting and less great is Michael Cohen. And I talk about him because last week was before his testimony, and we were all gearing up for the excitement. And I think we predicted it fairly well. It's like, okay, a couple of things that we kind of knew, some new details, and I guess he had the check, the reimbursement check for Stormy Daniels, which the only interesting thing to me is that it was written on Valentine's Day. What a nicer way to say I love you to your wife who stands by your side. Yeah, exactly. Just sort of, we don't need to spend much time on it, but just your overall thoughts on the Cohen hearings.
Well, I mean, like we talked about last week, it was pretty much exactly what I thought it was going to be, because I knew that the really juicy details were going to be behind closed doors, which they had the day before and the day after, and more or less he was going to say pretty much what we expected him to. I do, I found it really interesting that none of the Republicans really pushed back on any of the stuff that they were saying about Trump, being a liar or Trump's issues with, the hush money or anything else. It was mainly like, why do we believe you? Because you're a liar and you've been lying all this time for Trump. So I thought that was kind of the most fascinating thing, which I did expect, but it was still interesting to see that no Republicans basically said, oh no, Trump's, completely been, is innocent of these charges and the hush money and all that. I thought it was also interesting that Cohen kind of did brush off a little bit of the Russian collusion thing. Although again,
because he wasn't allowed to talk about it, right?
Yeah, but he kind of made it seem like he did a little bit, even though he wasn't supposed to, and he made it seem like maybe there wasn't per se directly with Trump. However, he wasn't supposedly directly involved with it, so I don't know. There's only so much you can take of that at face value too, considering it's an open public spectacle. So I wasn't necessarily going to expect him to say anything else, although he didn't really have anything to lose, so he could have gone in and said, yes, there was collusion. I just think because he wasn't allowed to, that maybe he didn't want to go into the full-on of anything else, because people kept saying, look, that vindicates Donald Trump. I said, not really, because he technically wasn't supposed to talk about it, And if he did, and there was damning things in there, that could have been even worse for him. So it was easier for him to even just say, "Oh no, nothing directly, linking Trump to Russia and everything." Which again, we'll find out as we move along. So I think that was a little bit surprising that he did kind of admit that publicly.
The narrative out of the White House on the Cohen testimony did a little bit of an about face.
Totally.
Because first of all, President Trump walked away from the meeting in Vietnam with Kim Jong Un, which we talked a lot about last week. Not a particularly good guy, really bad track record in murdering family members. And I don't know, am I supposed to say allegedly? But it's like I don't think he's even trying to deny it. So there's a lot of reasons really, but so I don't fault any president for being like, I don't need to be at this table with Kim Jong Un, but. He said that it was because it was a bad deal, and then then somebody got in his ear and said, "No, that's not what it was."
Exactly.
So President Trump said that it was Cohen's testimony that made him walk from the Kim summit, the Kim Jong Un summit. The president blamed the Democrats, and not a bad deal, for the failed talks because they quote hit a new low and interviewed a convicted liar and fraudster while he was in Vietnam, and. Look, always, what's the saying? Don't let any crisis go to waste.
Yeah.
Don't miss an opportunity to turn something into an attack on the other party. But he had been pretty upfront. He's like, I had to get out of there. This wasn't going to be a good deal. It was going to be bad for America. Actually, I really wanted to be there, but I just couldn't stand these Cohen hearings going on. And to the extent that President Trump was asked a lot of questions about the Cohen testimony, and then those reporters were barred from any of the subsequent events, I can see I was an irritant to him, but I don't think for a second that he was bothered by any of it. I mean, maybe it's just like, it's just so irritating. But I don't think that there's no way that those have anything to do with each other. Do you agree, Scott?
Oh, 1,000%. And I give them points here because they will find the most ridiculous things, and it just gets better and better of the lies and things that they will stretch to get to. But that's a new one. But it's like, first of all, with the time difference and everything, you're up working on stuff during the day when it's night here, and vice versa. So you're not even around. None of that's happening live when you're actually doing stuff, unless, per the usual, he's up, in the middle of the night, not sleeping and watching, TV and watching news. But it's laughable, first of all, to even try to connect those two because of whatever deal or not deal was happening in Vietnam. So I find that laughable, and it's also ironic that they're trying to push this whole lying thing when this was your person that worked closely with you for over a decade, and now all of a sudden, you want nothing to do with them. It's just he knows too many things, too many secrets about Trump, too much things about the Trump administration, and I think in general that there's only so much distance he can realistically put between him and Michael Cohen, regardless of what he says or doesn't say, which is going to be difficult in the future anyway. So.
Yeah, I don't know. You always have to give style points for creativity.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
As much as it makes you roll your eyes, you're just like, all right, they managed to tie those things together. It's good for the attempt.
And some of their base is going to, of course, buy it and be charged up and be like, great, that's why he left. And which, honestly, never should have been there to begin with. This is the type of thing that I hope that they sort of learned after the first summit, like, okay, let's downplay any expectations for this next summit. Let's not say we're doing all these big splashy things. But they still should have had more of the lower level, boring meetings between North Korea and the States than having the two heads of state trying to make some kind of deal. It just was silly. It was irresponsible. He never should have been there, but he thought, this was a great opportunity for him to go in first time around and do something great and then probably get himself a Nobel Peace Prize or whatever else he thought he was going to get out of it. So hopefully this will put this to rest and that they won't revisit it for a while because it wasn't good for either side. And of course, I saw Republicans before now trying to switch the Michael Cohen thing of why he left, basically saying, oh, this is brave of him to walk away from a bad deal and something like that, which he should have stuck with anyways. There's so many times where I'm like, you make it worse for you every time. If you would stick to some of these other things, you might actually draw some people that are on the fence about you, that are maybe moderate Republicans that never voted for you. you might get some of those people, but then you have to go double down and come up with these even more ridiculous, stupid, blatant lies that just, again, make people think, okay, why can we ever support him? Because he can't just go with the good stuff like that. He could have just gone and said, hey, I was a powerful, good negotiator. I walked away from what was going to be a bad deal.
Yeah.
And left it at that. And it would have been better for everybody.
I think it's all about sort of convincing, just a small sliver of people, like, oh my God, I can't believe the Democrats did that to this great man, our president, and
while he was there for us, trying to make this great deal.
He was trying to make peace. Do Democrats hate peace? Is that the problem? President Trump was also very busy over the weekend with a 2-hour-plus speech at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference. I don't know how much anybody likes any politician, but do you want to see anybody talk for 2.5 hours? I mean, I don't even like when a band plays for 2.5, like a band I love.
I'm like, okay, it's ready. I need to go.
I've seen Bruce Springsteen play for almost 4 hours, and it's great. But there's times in the middle where I'm like, all right, this didn't need to be. You could have trimmed some stuff in the middle. You don't need to go that long. But 2.5 hours, and he obviously he went off book, which that crowd loved. And he accused the Mueller's team of trying to take him out with bullshit, and that's actually what he said. And accused a top Clinton aide of not having recovered from getting his ass kicked. And this is fine because we know that he talks like this, and also. I don't know. I mean, let's not clutch our pearls. The fact that, a grown man uses words like that in this day and age is fine.
Of course.
I mean, we are way past the point of like what's presidential and what's not presidential. It's not all attributed to Donald Trump. I would say that President Clinton was not particularly presidential with a number of the things that he did while he was president. So, maybe up until that point, we'd done a pretty good job. I'm sure you can find examples,
Oh, of course. You can go back, but they kept it a little more hidden.
Yeah, exactly. It was just like, it's what we know. Yeah. So, I've actually, in my role as a radio producer, I actually once went to CPAC, and people are so excited about everything. And I can't imagine what that was like for people to be there, because I do think that there is, a segment of young conservatives that are energized by this guy who does talk like that. And he says the things that they're thinking, and, any politician, especially when you speak for 2.5 hours, is going to throw plenty of red meat out there. Yeah. But I don't know, Scott, are you just, not that what he said, are you surprised that he talked that long to that crowd? It wasn't, no, I guess you could have seen it on like C-SPAN. It was on TV somewhere.
It was.
Yeah. It just, I was about to say it wasn't televised, but
no,
it
was.
I just remember that I didn't watch it because I'm like, I don't need to see it. I'll just read about it.
It was, I watched part of it because it was a little bit earlier, West Coast time, and it was Saturday. Okay, so sleeping in. But the point is, kind of going back to that too, about you saying like people like to hear, presidents now cuss. It's a known thing. There was a whole article actually a couple weeks ago, like opinion section about the presidential speech and how they said, Obama had such a soaring speech and Trump is, so base and everything, but. Basically that the speech patterns have shifted, and they were going back to actually Reagan and talking about the way presidents spoke and how it has kind of trended through the past 35, 40 years, and that Trump more or less does speak like most of the everyday people. And it kind of goes back to some things we've talked about in the past too, about how people connect with him because he comes up with simple phrases and things like that, but it does connect to a wide swath of people. So that's part of the reason why I think a lot of people do like listening to him. And of course, I'm not surprised he went 2.5 hours because he loves to talk. This is him in his element. This is him being able to be off script, be himself. And I would have to say that it had to have been one of the more entertaining speeches when you think about CPAC and a lot of times how buttoned up it is. And especially in the past when Obama was president and you had a lot of other people that were speaking, you had very buttoned up, very kind of boring speeches. So I think it could go either way. Some of the audience members were probably just kind of disgusted, probably on one side. Of course, you're getting some of the red meat, but I think the other side, like you said, maybe some of these younger conservatives and other people were probably loving it because it was so off the book, so crazy. You know, it was like I honestly couldn't believe half the stuff he was saying, and there was no cohesiveness to it. It was just all over the place.
Yeah,
he just was going from one thing to another. And
it was as off book gets. And to your point about it being entertaining, I mean, he did a Jeff Sessions impression.
Yeah, a really bad one, but
you know what? But that doesn't even.
No, I know, but
it doesn't matter. It's just the fact that he did that. And so, in case you're wondering what the Donald Trump one-man show is going to look like,
right in his post-presidency,
yeah.
But that's the amazing thing too, because when you think about it, it wasn't that long ago that no president would dare even talk badly about an AG that he appointed or people in his own party. You would never in a million years. So it's even more fascinating to me that not only has Trump been able to basically hijack this party, but he's been able to talk negatively about other people that have been in the party for years. And here's like the reddest red Republican and Jeff Sessions and red Alabama. And you're able to basically make fun of him in front of an audience of conservatives. To me, is just really fascinating that he's been able to shift it that much to where he could do that, and people were eating it up. And which you would think about with George W. Bush doing something like that, and you just could never imagine that even a decade ago, or Mitt Romney, for instance.
Right, exactly. Mitt Romney is like the sort of like presidential candidate you'd expect.
Exactly, but that's why it's like, oh my God, because when he was doing these impressions, I thought, I can't believe how much this party has changed. It's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And, to the point that I was making earlier about how they can really harp on the Green New Deal, I mean, he was able to simplify it, just talking about when the wind stops blowing, that's the end of your electric. Darling, is the wind blowing? I'd like to watch television, he quipped.
Yeah.
He also said, I like the Green New Deal. I respect it greatly. It should be part of the dialogue of the next election. If it is a major issue and they're able to really hammer away at it, it's not going to help,
No. It's actually brilliant, and that's why Trump gets as far as he does, because he simplifies it. It's something that everyone can understand. You put it in a bite-sized thing like that. That's the way we are today. Our attention span is short. Nobody wants to read the details. And here's someone that's going to basically dumb it down into something like that. And going back to what we were talking about at the top of the show, the Democrats also unveiled this Green New Deal without really having it really buttoned up too.
Yeah.
So they already let it to be open to having a lot of holes and a lot of issues, and that's where the Republicans have come in and eat it up and spit it back out again. But yeah, that's what Trump is brilliant. I mean, it's those type of things where he's the build the wall, these little phrases, these little nicknames, things like that make it very easy for people. And he is entertaining, as crazy as he was, and I always say this, like some of his speeches, I think that's the craziest speech. I don't think he can ever top that. Well, he just topped it again on CPAC, and I think he's never going to be able to do something like that again, and I'm sure he'll top that in the next couple weeks.
He'll have a 3.5-hour speech somewhere else.
It was just so all over the place. I thought, was he on something? Was he just so jet lagged that he just didn't even have any idea what he was even talking about? Because I just thought he was off in his own world there for a while.
Yeah.
And we didn't even talk about the flag pumping.
Oh yeah, no, I know.
Like, oh my God, and people are like eating that up. I'm like, it's so ridiculous.
I definitely agree. One of the this isn't going to move the impeachment clock one way or the other, but it seems like in about 2 weeks, Democrats are expected to demand President Trump's tax return, which even if he was somebody that we all liked and we all voted for, I'm always interested in that kind of stuff. I'm like the guy who says he's a billionaire, and people, there's a lot of questions. I'm fascinated to see what his finances are.
Absolutely.
Also, I know Chelsea's friend Bernie Sanders is being a little tight with his tax returns too.
Right, which we talked about.
I
think
last week.
That sets the tone now, because you're saying, okay, if there's anything in my, whatever with his donations to NRA or whatever it is that's going to freak out his base, it's the same thing with Trump. But now Trump has opened that door to be like, well, I don't have to turn mine in, so now no one else is going to feel that obligation either, because I'm sure there is probably something there, something that you could say, great, well, Bernie Sanders donated to the NRA like $1 million. Right. I mean, he doesn't have $1 million, but I'm just saying something crazy or some kind of thing that would really make that extreme left base freak out. Yeah, and it's the same kind of thing.
So, in 2 weeks, we're expected to be asked, we're expecting Democrats to demand them, probably take a little while to get them. Do you think there's a chance that he is still just like, I don't know, make me, like come to the White House and take them.
He's going to fight it tooth and nail. And so, yes, he's going to delay as much as he can. And, now he's trying to shift the strategy and say, okay, well, because there's no collusion, now they're trying to find all these other things against me. And, something else about presidential harassment against me on Twitter.
Despite the fact that was something that they were looking into before before Russian collusion.
That's what I was going to say.
Just like, what's in those tax returns?
Exactly. I mean, the thing is, I don't know why he would think that even if there was no collusion and Mueller comes in tomorrow and says everyone's innocent, this was, whatever. The point is there's still so many other things that are going on, and Democrats have said for the past 2 years that they were going to do these things. It is not a surprise. And, you get some people that say, yes, they should, and then other people are saying they're not doing their jobs. But I do think there is a place for that, because especially with someone like Trump is a president that none of us have ever seen before, as far as the businesses, the business entanglements, what things, what favors are foreign governments trying to curry favor with him and his family, what other things could he be involved with that could be helping him profit from. So there are a lot of things there. And again, if there isn't anything to hide, he should be forthcoming and be like, look, there is nothing here. You guys are making a big deal about nothing. Now, my whole thing is, even if he doesn't have any shady business dealings, he's vain. And part of my fear, my thought is his fear is that, he's going to release his tax returns and people are going to see he does not have the money that he claims to have.
Right.
Because a lot of that money is on paper anyways. A lot of that money is in businesses for the ultra wealthy anyway. So when you're talking about actually having most wealthy people are very cash poor, because everything's tied up on paper in other areas. It's not very liquid. So I think in general, he's afraid that people are going to see that he does not have the money he says he does. Whatever other potential business entanglements, whether conflicts of interest he may have, that he's also probably nervous about. I think that's the biggest one that he's afraid for people to see that he's really not this person that he's claimed to be the whole time.
Yeah, for me personally, I think it's more what you're talking about than some like insidious dastardly plan that is going to be reflected. If tax returns that are filed with the IRS aren't going to have anything crazy in there.
They're going to be boring, and they're also going to be something that would be very difficult to blatant, unless it's something very blatant that's said in the company name. Giving money to Russia for it's LLC. It's going to be very hard to track that, and it very complicated, so people it's not going to be an answer, a clear answer for people. So the bottom line is something that's very clear and evident is, he doesn't have the money that he claims to have, and that's where I think the biggest fear for him is, for sure.
In terms of the collusion, Adam Schiff said over the past week that the Trump campaign, there is direct evidence of collusion, not conclusion, but collusion. And there's a lot of focus on this Trump Tower meeting that Don Jr. had. But it keeps coming up, but I don't know, maybe I'm just seeing it wrong. It seems like it's not as big a deal as people are telling us it is, at least to the perception of the way that the media covers it. Because if this was the big deal that Adam Schiff says it is, you wouldn't move on to the next story. I feel like you'd really focus on this.
Well, I think there's two parts to it. One is, and we've talked about this forever too. I mean, year and a half, close to 2 years. I think the big thing that we're going to find is not so much that he directly colluded with Russia. It's going to be what are the people in his campaign did. But it's also going to be, what did he cover up, or what did he, try to do for obstruction of justice? Those are the things that are going to come up that I think are going to be hard for him to deny. And those are the things that he should be concerned about. And it's like everything else, going back to Nixon, it's the same thing. It's like the cover up and the lying and all that is worse than the actual crime.
Right.
But I also agree with you to a point that I don't think there is as much, or it's a lot harder to draw the conclusions on the meeting and the one meeting and who he talked to and what it was about. And just like the point blank direct collusion with Russia. But on the other hand, again, until we have a clear report from Mueller and it's released to the public and we know where everything's connected, it's really hard to even go any further with the meeting and everything else. Because like you said, it's been digested so many times. There's only so many things you're going to get from it. Until you actually have a clear answer, I think it's hard for the media to go any further, because it is the same thing until there's more to it, which we're not going to get.
And I think, as we've talked about in recent weeks, that when there's a finished Mueller report, we won't get to see it. And it's
it may take some time to even see, and whatever parts are there or what parts are redacted. But again, we've been talking about this because they said, "Oh, it's imminent," and it was going to be last week, and then it was the week before. Now it's
It's like anything. There's always somebody who has the inside sources. Like my sources tell me that Mueller report is going to be
exactly.
It's like I know when the secret Taylor Swift album is coming out. Which I don't, by the way, so don't ask.
I do, but I'm not going to talk about it.
That's to Drexel because he's a huge Taylor Swift fan. We only have a few minutes here. This is a story that I thought was interesting and wanted to kind of get your thoughts on. We were talking about Joe Biden earlier, and Joe Biden was speaking, which he does a lot, let's be honest. But no, he was at an event, and he said something nice about the current vice president, Mike Pence, which is, I feel like that's kind of the decorum. I mean, unless you're actually, talking about an issue that you have a problem with, you're going to just mention the guy. And, you say a decent guy, our vice president, is actually, that's the direct quote, is what he said. And he had to apologize for saying that Mike Pence is a nice guy.
Yeah.
And I do understand the reason why, because obviously of Mike Pence's issues, it's not, issues isn't even strong enough, so I'll let you talk about it. And if you think that people that insisted Joe Biden apologize, and the fact that he did apologize for calling the sitting vice president a decent guy. Yeah, a decent guy. He didn't even say nice.
Yeah.
He said a decent guy. What do you think about that?
Well, and then he kind of tried to backtrack and say it was about a very particular situation with whatever it was with the.
Yeah, he picked up a tab once. That's a decent guy,
Yeah, it was, but that's how he tried to frame it. It's like, oh, I wasn't talking about in general. I was talking about whatever. I forget what it was now because I did read about. I don't think it was the North Korea deal. It was something else. Maybe it was Venezuela or whatever. I think it was something like that where it was like, I was going down to deal with this.
That's exactly what it was.
And it's something we all kind of agree with and blah, blah, blah. And then it got sort of misconstrued from that and being like, he thinks he's this, decent guy. And it's a fine line in general. I think we have obviously, thanks mostly to Trump, lost a lot of that decorum because it was one of those things that previous presidents, and Obama still stuck to that for the most part. He's gotten fired a few times here and there, but previous presidents never talked about the current president.
George Bush never talked about Obama while he was in office.
Right. It's just one of those things that you would do. It's like, okay, my time president is done. We might be from different political parties, but at the end of the day, we all want what's best for the country. It might be we just have different ways of getting about it. But now, and it was kind of the same thing with vice presidents too. It was just, this is a part of the club, and we're chummy, and we're. Yeah. But now it's turned into the minute you say anything nice about the other side, then it's completely wrong. And I feel like there's a line. You obviously want to keep your very passionate base and the people that are going to go out and support, especially if you're thinking about running for president. You want those people to be passionate, vote for you, because then you're going to be in the same kind of situation that Hillary Clinton was in, is that people may sit out because like, oh, he's just a watered down version of Republicans.
Right.
Or, I'm not going to feel so on one hand, you do want to get those people passionate, but on the other hand, I think that we also kind of lose a little bit of that decorum now even more because we can't even say anything nice. And again, I personally would never say anything nice about Mike Pence, but I also personally have not been vice president before and have worked in the exactly, and have worked with whatever was going on with the government and knowing what Biden knows about what Pence was doing when he was down there and whatever that situation was. So and Joe Biden's known for his gaffes too, which used to be charming and cute before Trump.
Yeah.
But so that's just another one to add to. If I was him, I would not be saying anything nice about this current administration just to cover his own self. But on the flip side, you also want to get some of the moderates too that might lean more Republican, like in the Midwest and other places that feel like the current Democratic Party is too liberal and not speaking to them. So it's a tight line for Joe Biden for sure.
Right. I mean, at issue obviously is Mike Pence's track record. The way he's viewed by the LGBTQ community,
which is why I would never say anything nice about him. I also find him as almost as fake and whatever to Donald Trump stuff.
Like when you think of a like what's a politician, you kind of envision Mike Pence.
You do.
Yeah,
that's the central casting version. If I was casting a politician, I'm like, great, he's
right.
got the game.
Every movie where they have like a president that's not supposed to be a real president, it usually looks like Mike Pence.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if he was the Barbie doll version in the stores, you'd be like, great, there's the president.
Right. Exactly.
Politician type, and
exactly
with the suit and the helmet hair and everything else. So yeah, he plays that role perfectly in that sense.
So I understand obviously that those are very important issues. Obviously something that Democrats don't want to be seen as in the wrong side of. I don't know. I guess just the idea that you can't say that someone's a nice guy. Look, you didn't say Trump was a decent guy,
right?
I can see if somebody said that, then it's like, wait a minute. And I know people don't like Mike Pence, but I don't know. I just found the whole thing. I'm like, oh, we can't even say. And yes, there's a specific group has a specific problem with him, but still, it's like, I don't know. Can you even say that somebody on the other side is a decent guy? Could Mike Pence say that Obama was a decent guy? Whether he would or not is not the issue.
Yeah, I don't think he would. But
I mean, would he? Clearly, Trump wouldn't say that. But so I don't know. I just that's where we're at. I guess.
I think it was a little much. Again, I would never do it, and I wasn't particularly happy, but I also knew he was talking about a very, very, very specific situation, which was whatever with the Venezuela thing. It wasn't even about him in general. And I do think there is a little bit more of the everything's crazy, you've got to fight about every little thing now. It's a fine line, but if he's going to run for president, these are the type of things he's going to have to deal with in this world, that he's got to be very careful about that kind of stuff.
Well, we only have 2 minutes. Do you think Joe Biden's going to run for president?
The longer it takes, the less likely I think he will.
Yeah.
I personally don't think he should because, and I don't want to sound ageist, but I just really do feel at this point in time that we should get some newer, younger, bolder faces of the Democratic Party to run for president. I think the 70-plus-year-old straight white guy has had their time, and so that's my only thing.
Yeah, and by the way, like if a 50-year-old, that's I'm not saying
that's young to me.
It doesn't need to be somebody in their 30s.
No, I'm like 50 sounds young.
You're 36 and you can run for president.
Yeah.
No, so we're just talking about, and I agree like wholeheartedly. Yeah, it's just if you have somebody that's in their early 50s and if they're a white male, that's but their message is connecting.
Right.
To me, that's more important. Like who's the candidate? Are they connecting with people? Are people going to vote for them? But it's the argument against Bernie, against Hillary.
Definitely.
Is
Bernie and Biden in particular, because they're going to be over 80 years old before their first term would even be over. And I think you get to a point where it's like, that's retirement age. You don't need someone that's running the entire country in the free world here with nuclear codes who's north of 80 years old. Not saying you can't have people that are coherent and everything. It's just, it's a very stressful job as it is for anybody, but let alone someone of that advanced age. But I also just feel like it's time to get some new people and some new ideas. These people have been around forever, and it's time to just get some new people.
But don't worry, because Scott and I won't retire until we're in our 80s, so we'll still be here until then.
I'll be working.
And we'll certainly be here next Tuesday at 4 Pacific, 7 Eastern for another installment of the Trump Report. Until then, where can people find you, Scott?
They can find me on Twitter, probably saying something about Mitch McConnell, S-Man80. That's S-Man80.
And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. Thanks so much to everybody who's in the chat and everybody out there in the audience. We will see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Our founder, Kevin Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.